Oh. Oh, I almost didn't see you there. Hello. And as we're waiting for all the followers to join, I'm just going to say hello. If you're just joining, hello again and again. I'm just going to ramble on a little bit about Type Thursday and some of our sponsors while we wait for people to show up. I'm Mirko Velimirović. I used to be the chapter lead before Farida, who's doing such an excellent job now. She's the one who's been organizing all of this online content that I know all you online people deserve and crave. And it's very nerve-wracking because tonight I'm actually going to be some online content. I'm going to be doing some lettering. Who do I need to thank tonight? I need to thank Casa Ora for doing all of our catering when we're not stuck indoors, when we're back at the TDC, which is where we usually are on one Thursday a month. I want to say thanks to the TDC for putting up with us all these years. And hopefully Casa Ora will continue to put up with our nonsense. And I'd like to thank Farida for doing such an excellent job as chapter lead. She's really incredible. And yeah, once there's enough people here, I'll start. Oh, good, great. Seems like there's enough of you. I can't tell. My lovely girlfriend is just giving me hand gestures, and I'm interpreting them best I can. So tonight I'm going to be talking about three different. They're just pens, but we'll call them tools to sound professional. I'm going to talk about three different lettering tools that I use as they spin all over the place on the table. I'm going to be talking about this Muji double-sided pen. It's got the thick and, of course, the thin. I'm going to talk about how to draw with that. I'm going to talk about everybody's favorite Pilot Parallel here. This is the 3.8 mil. It's just your good old Nordzein flat-edged broad-nib pen. I think they're really excellent. They're like $10. And I don't use the. Maybe we'll get into this a little bit later, but you might notice that it's really gross and brown, and that's because I don't use. I don't follow the rules. I use Tom Norton walnut ink, which, I should beauty blog it. Let me just, can you see? There it is. Anyway, I like walnut ink a lot. It has a really nice brown gradient when you draw with it. You'll see. It's a lovely ink. I really like the viscosity, and I find that sometimes the standard cartridges that come with the Pilot pens, that ink will bleed on cheaper paper, and I find that walnut ink really it holds up across a lot of different substrates, and it's a lovely ink, and it lasts a long time, and it also has a historical element in that. For example, I've got some books here that in Scribes and Sources, for example, a lovely Godine published book. They talk about the origin of the Chancery hand, and they have a lot of writing from the scribes in the 16th century who talk about making walnut ink, and so you can still use walnut ink and feel historical. But I just do it because I like how it draws. It's a nice ink. And then the last tool that I'll be beauty blog this as well. It's a Pentel watercolor brush. So the body of the pen is usually you would fill it with water, but again I've just filled the whole thing with walnut ink, and I just use what are these, pipettes? Somebody who knows about the economy, tell me what this is. No, I'm pretty sure, pipette. I just buy a big bag of pipettes, I haven't run out yet. And I just stick it in the walnut ink and I fill the reservoirs on the pens. All right. I think does anybody have any questions about the pens? Is there anything in the comments about where to get them? Or I could say, like, I think you can get the Muji pens. Obviously, you get at Muji. If you don't have a Muji near you, like all of us right now, because we're all stuck inside, you can just use Sharpies. You're just trying to get like a bunch of black ink on paper and then have a thinner nib to draw an outline. And we'll get into that when we start drawing.
Repeat the book.
Oh, the book. Here. This is Scribes and Sources. I think I found this at Strand. Another thing I'm missing right now. It's by A.S. Osley, and there's an account of Jean de Beauhesne, I've completely butchered that name, by Bertold Volpe, or Bertold Volpe. I'm going to screw up all the names. But yeah, this is an excellent book, and it's got a lot of really nice like handwriting samples, like woodcuts of Chancery hand, but it also has it's just kind of a nice window into sort of the mind of like the scribes who basically invented the way that we do the alphabet today. So you find that there's a lot of bickering between different schools of drawing, which is kind of funny. I feel like we still argue about like how square an A should be, and it's just nice to see that people have always been petty and that we'll never give that up. So if you have a petty disagreement with another type person, just know that has a long and storied history, and that you're really just adding to the tradition of our craft. So don't stop hating. Except for now. Please don't hate on this video. Cool. I'm going to get right into talking about lettering with the broad nib pen to start out with. So, you want to come back over here? So I'm going to be using the. Can people see the paper?
No complaints so far.
No complaints so far. That's what we like. So I've got the broad nibbed Pilot Parallel. You've probably seen these in the videos that we all watch, because we're a strange group of people, so we watch people draw with pens. I'm going to do what I sort of think of as like a Nordsey asterisk. And when I say Nordsey, I'm talking about Harriet Nordsey. This is another book you should pick up if you're really interested in sort of the theory behind taking calligraphy and turning it into type. This is sort of it's not a long read, but we're going to make a figure that looks kind of like this. It's pretty cool that I just opened straight to that page. I call it like a Nordsey asterisk, but it just looks like this. So I'm holding the pen at a 30-degree angle, and you'll notice that all right, cool. So let's talk about why these lines look the way they do, and this is pretty foundational to what makes letters look like this, for example. So there's an italic A, a sort of Chancery italic A at a 30-degree. So there's my pen, right? 30 degrees. Cool. So the reason that this figure has a thin line here, a very thick line here, sort of medium here, and then a sort of, what you could call like, just like the basic stroke, or like, think of it as like the median thickness of the parallelograms that you can create with this tool. That all comes from the angle of the pen, right? So Nordsey calls that the rotation, right? So this is a rotationally contrasted, and by contrast, we're talking about the difference between this thin and this thick, right? So there's the thins, which tend to be these upstrokes,
and the thicks, which we can see are like when the pen is going from the top left to the bottom right. And when you're going from the bottom left, i.e. here, up towards the top right, because of the way that the pen is held at that consistent angle, let's just do another italic A here. So that's too tall and narrow, but the idea is that when you're coming from the bottom left and up, you'll get a thin. So I'm just going to write, let's talk a little bit about then how you can measure out some like kind of consistent proportions. So I've got like a nice ruled page here, and I did some measuring earlier, and I found out that about 3 lines is what I want for some lowercase letters. But the reason for that, and I'll explain that now, is that typical proportions for a lowercase would be about 5 of these nib widths tall. So I'll just draw that out real quick. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh my goodness! I can't. Oh, how did that even happen? It's so it's good that that this is. It's about 3.8 times 5, I guess. I'm not going to do the math because it's hard enough to think about letters and talk to you all. But I'm going to write the word gas, and then if there are any questions about that, I will maybe answer them as you have them. So I'm going to start with the lowercase g to make the head. And the head of the lowercase g is very much like the O, only, of course, it's a little bit smaller, right? Because here's the baseline, here's the x height. You can see I've got a little bit of room here because I'm going to need to put that tail on. I do the ear next, just because. And you can get really crazy with this. I mean, you don't want to go whole like, Pluto, floppy dog-eared, but you can get kind of wild. And then I come out of this connection here on the head to the tail, and I do a nice S curve, and I come a little bit down, and then I connect it back. There's my lowercase g. And it's probably a little bit too, much inside of like a ziggurat, but you can shore that up when you get to digitizing it. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Now I'm going to do my A. I like to do a little loop to start it out. Just something I like. You don't have to. This A is going to be way too wide. And then, I try to get the bowl. And here I feel like, for my taste, that's a little bit too far in. Like, maybe this guy, this ear up here, or this lobe, it came out too far. So again, that's something you can fix in digital, or you can fix when you go over with trace. Because most of what I do with lettering, I'm not really a calligrapher. I like calligraphy, but I'm mostly just trying to make digital forms out of these letters. How much time we got left on this tool?
How do you do the loop?
How do I do the loop? What do you mean by the loop? The loop up here? If you mean the loop like the lobe on the A, if everybody can see that, I start here, essentially, and I twirl around. I just make like a little, like almost a tittle for like an eye, and I come back around. And that for me creates this really nice, strange, like truncated shape that's really smooth here, but has this like very abrupt sort of entry into the main shoulder of the A. And I don't know, I find it pleasant, and I think I like it because there's a lot of empty space here otherwise, and you need to balance out the form a little bit. And it's not that you should just fill all empty spaces, certainly not, but it balances the sort of second, more open counter in the A, and it gives it this rhythm, I think, also between the shape of that lobe and the way that the foot of the main stroke of the A comes out. So I'm going to do an S now, and I'm going to shut up because I'm going to get it wrong even without talking, so I guess I can talk a little bit. So I try to get the snake of the S. I try to do the middle first. I do a little bit of rotation with the pen to get a little horn, or like a nose, a beak, I guess. And I'm never happy with the way my S looks. I don't think anyone is. I'd be lying if you ever get that. Strange. Mic is covered. How's that? Is it better now? Can you all hear? Is it good? Somebody in the comments say something if you can hear. I don't think the mic is. Oh, it's good. Okay, excellent, excellent.
Just holding it bad.
No, you're doing a great job. All right, cool. So if there aren't any questions about the. Okay, cool. Where should I repeat from? Should I just draw gas again?
No.
Everybody wave. Yes? Draw gas again? All right, I'll do it again. I'm just going to... Okay, cool. So as we kind of figured out before...
The S.
Just the S. Oh, okay. So for an S, I like to make a beautiful snake, right? Oh, such a great snake. And then I like to ruin it. Because this is hard. I change the rotation of the pen. Now I know that technically, right, you just, if I didn't do anything fancy, I would just get something like this or like this. But this to me doesn't look very much like what I'm expecting on an S, this I don't know. And that's an aesthetic thing, right? That's a preference. Because you could put a lobe on your S, or you could put, some really, if you're drawing Memphis, maybe, or Stymie, you just draw some horrible blocks, except this is backwards. But if you flip it and reverse these guys, and you've got these horrible, I hate slab serifs. I don't know if that's coming through, but Clarendon's, oh God. Anyway, so I'll just do the S again. But basically I do a nice snake. And you're supposed to give this guy here, this thumb coming in, and this thumb here, right? This, you need a little bit more oomph, a little bit more white, because, and it's okay if you go over of course there's going to be some overshoot, right? And it's not going to be as dramatic as my crappy drawing. When you digitize, you're going to squeeze that in a little bit, but you'll work so long on the S that you'll forget you ever drew it in the first place. So it's fun practice to do it on paper, but if you're making a font, you're gonna hate this S. All right, let's go on to the brush pen. Is that cool? Everybody cool with that? Lots of waves. Okay. I'm going to take the waves as, let's watch Mirko do the word gas with the brush pen. So I'm doing the same word over and over again for consistency, but for the sake of getting warmed up with like a down-up sort of brush scripty style with a pen like this, you would probably want to write minimum over and over and over again. And I really just down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, get it until you've got a really nice sort of rhythm. And the word minimum is great for that because it's got all the big thing is mum, right? It has that shift from up, where you have these like very strong downs in your M. And I am by no means to the way that the U, which is essentially the same structure, right? But it has to look different from the way that the downstrokes function in your other script letters.
How do you make the M and U and I different?
Yep, that's the question, right? Like, how do you do that? And I don't have. It's not like I have some secret that I'm trying to hold from you. I'm sure that there's like words to describe it, but it's really feeling. I think that on the U, I try to remember that I'm curling up, right, to give it that nice U-shaped bowl to get a U, versus on like an N, I'm trying to make that curl. It's basically the way that, if you think of these as like waves, you're trying to get the wave to sort of lap up on the U. And then on the N, you're trying to get it to break this way. And it gets weirder than once you've got all of your like basic rhythm established. And I'm not pretending like I have it established right now or that I ever do. But once you get that established, then you can go into trying to bring it to the rest of your forms. And then, you can get weird, like add a little bit, like on the S. Like if you do a C, for example, sometimes there'll be a style that does these big, chunky bits that sit on the C. Or like, if we're writing crimp or something. I'm getting off topic. Let's write gas again. This making sense, y'all? And you'll notice also that I didn't really, oh, that tail is terrible. If anybody has good advice on how to do tails, I know this is me talking about lettering, but so I'm never happy with the way that my brush lettering looks first time round. So I'm going to do a little transition stuff here where I start talking about the other tools anyway. So that horrible tearing sound is my ambition to be a brush letterer, but also the trace paper that I'm putting over this.
What's the difference of the stroke if someone does it with a regular brush than with this pen?
Well, I don't quite know what you mean by regular brush. I'm going to assume like a regular, like pointed brush. I'll draw some. Like if you mean like a brush like this, so a pointed brush, right? And then if you had a flat bristle brush, which actually I have, so I can show you. What's the difference? Well, let's look. So here's a flat brush. I don't even know where this is from. It's just like a 5/8 Horizon Group. That sounds good and technical. Horizon Group USA, China. So who knows where it's from? Let's get some walnut ink. So I'm going to do the same like up-down style, but with I'm going to get a more like italic, like, broad nib brush feel. Right? So if you mean the difference between like a broad nib brush and a more like painterly like watercolor brush, right? The difference is that the broad nibbed brush has expansion in a small way, but it otherwise functions like a broad nib pen. So when I say expansion, I mean, let's see, do another sheet here. When I say expansion, I mean that if I'm pushing a little bit, like lightly, and then I go like that. If I push a lot of pressure, so this is expansion, right? And that's not a like huge feature of like a broad nibbed brush. You're not using the expansion as much. You're mostly using the rotation. But with like a pointed pen, you're getting a different amount of pressure as you go on your downstrokes from your upstrokes. And so your downstrokes are heavier than your upstrokes. And that's what creates that nice sort of pressure gradient. And so, yeah, you can see again, like, so this is the expansion, right, of the pressure. And I wish I could make that look beautiful, like some Adobe brush or something that you've, but anyway, that's the difference. I hope that answers the question. Yeah? It's a more consistent stroke. Yeah, that's accurate. Cool. I'm going to move on to, before I was doing that, I was going to say, if you're unhappy like I am with the way that your brush lettering looks, you can always grab some trace and start going over it. Maybe you really want to round out those shapes. And maybe, if you're like me, you're always drawing these terrible tails. You want to sort of fix that.
Would pressing down on someone's brush ruin it?
Well, I'm not inviting you over to press down on my brushes, but, I don't know. I guess that kind of depends on the brush, right? Like, so then once I've like fixed it up, I'd go back in and I'd, hope that looks better. And you can just iterate on that over and over again. Pushing down on the brushes shouldn't destroy them, right? I mean, you don't want to like jab it into the paper over and over again. But, so, maybe that improved the G. I'm not sure. It might have done. Yeah, it's probably, there's just not a lot of contrast, and I don't do a lot of brush lettering. But yeah, that's improved it, I think. And then, you could respace it as well when you're using trace, which is nice. But anyway, I would, maybe space it out a little bit there, add a little bit of room. Let that A breathe. And, so on and so forth, right? Maybe open the counter a little bit, but round it out at the bottom. Just guy things, Yeah. Give it a little more curve there. And now that I'm on this tool, actually, as soon as I finish filling in this A, maybe I should do the whole thing. Folks probably want to see the whole thing, right? Once I fix this up, I'll switch over to just drawing with the pen I'm using right now, and then I'll show how to digitize. Okay. Or I'll show how I digitize. I feel so high and mighty, right? Like, and this is how you digitize. I don't know. Digitize however you like, but I'll give you some thoughts. So there is that. Cool. So the word gas. Great. We've all got it. The Pentel brush pens are very durable. You apply. Yeah, you can do that. There's a ton of different. The brush. So you're talking about the Pentel brush pen I've got. Yeah, I haven't had to. I buy new ones because I'm vain and I like to have lots and lots of pens. But I don't have to buy new ones. I've had them for a few years and they work great. Same thing with the, oh, it looks like I got a switch. All right. Let's talk about the double-ended Muji pen. And again, vanity, right? You could just use, let me grab them. You could just use, good old Sharpies. There's nothing stopping, well, not having Sharpies might stop you. I shouldn't say there's nothing stopping you. You might not have Sharpies. And I'm sorry to that man. Sorry. Or that woman. Or non-binary person. Any person who doesn't have Sharpies, I'm sorry. You should always have some Sharpies on hand. Yeah. Let's write gas again. Oh, and if people are curious about the crappy little notebook I'm using, it's just one of the Muji school packs. I like the paper. I like going to Muji. I miss Muji. Sound off in the comments what art supply store you guys miss going to. I miss going to Artists and Craftsmen. I try to go there if I can. Cool. So I'm gonna just do a version of the broad nib pen. So whoops, yeah, something like that. But I'm gonna do it with a Sharpie. And then we're going to jump onto the computer if there aren't questions. All right. So I try to keep a consistent angle. And there's a million tutorials on this, right? Like if you go to the Glyphs website, or if you look up, I think James Edmondson. And again, I'm talking remember earlier I was talking about that snake coming out of the head of the G. It's actually pretty metal. Yeah, you try to keep that consistent angle. And again, I've got way too much of a trapezoid.
Why do it like that instead of drawing the borders?
Oh, well, because you're trying to build form, right? So I could try to do...
So can we do something about the lighting?
Oh, yeah, the lighting is not great.
It's not good, but it's what we have.
It is what we have.
Can
How's
we
that?
move
Is
the
that
walnut ink?
We can move the walnut ink. We can put it on top of Fred Schneider's. Oh, my goodness!
We have vintage lighting, so that's hot.
Yeah, it is hot. All right, so I could try and do my best to... I don't know. It's very hard because you're second guessing the lines over and over again, and then... there are people who can do it. I think Paul Shaw can draw like that, or he's told me he can. But it's hard to sort of guess the form, and it becomes very sketchy, and you don't really know where those points should be, right? Is it the first line, the second line, the third line? And this is a matter of academic debate. I know there are plenty of type designers and lecturers in type design who, will argue one way or the other. I don't know, man. It doesn't really matter. This is just one way to do it. I feel like if you're comfortable drawing with a pencil and you really like drawing with a pencil, for example, Ken Barber draws with pencils and he does an incredible job. And sometimes he just draws the outlines and he just fills them in really fast. And you're like, Ken, that's the opposite of what I was taught. And he's like, well, I'm Ken Barber, so he's a tremendous letterer. So it's whatever you feel comfortable with. I think that the merits in drawing like this are that you see immediately where that form is, right? And then when you draw the outline of that form, you are very sure that that's what it should be, right? And it's a fast way to sort of, I think the point of it is that it's a very fast way to iterate, and it's a way of thinking about letter making that is iterative. Sorry, that's iterative versus thinking of creating that perfect line the first time. You're not going to create the perfect line the first time, and in calligraphy, which this isn't, right? This is sculptural drawing, right? You're building a form. I've lost myself in the letters. In building a form, you're just trying to get the idea of it very quickly, and then iterate on several different ideas of that form, and you're not too worried about the perfect line, because you're going to be doing that in a few minutes anyway. When you take that idea you've had, those basic proportions, and throw them into your font editor. So, yeah, not great if you're just like drawing on a piece of paper as the final product, but if you're trying to make a bunch of iterations, good. All right, I think, let's see, just a second. Okay, cool, yeah. We'll hit save. Got you, Farida. Thank you for the heads up via text. Cool, I'm just going to finish up the lettering here. So, yeah, I'm going to rough it all out. And I've stopped talking, sorry. This technique, for whatever reason, I think it... fuck the S. We're going to do another line. That's the other thing. It's fast, so you'll just iterate. If you make a horrible mistake like I've just done, iterate. You'll probably do better the second time. It's like a driver's test, right? Just like keep taking it. I don't mean to sound like I'm really pro-driving. That's not what this podcast is about, y'all. It's not a podcast. Sorry, my brain goes into autopilot. I can't draw an S while I'm talking. I'm so sorry, everybody. The nice thing here, though, right, is that you're going to come in, and the point is you'll make outlines. And let's just pretend that this worked out the way that we wanted. It's atrocious, but we'll live with it because we're going to be going into digital space in just a moment. Right? Cool. So that's the 3 tool styles, and then once we'd finish this up, we'd go back over with trace, and we'd say like, oh man, this curve here, that's awful, right? Like we still want this to be thin, but like this really needs to round out differently, because that was a miserable mistake. And this is where you can start getting, really persnickety about your, see like right there, I probably was talking to you, so I did an oops. And you want to, this is where you can get really careful about your iteration with your lines and making them really beautiful. And then once you get that shape finished, maybe we want more. Once you got this done, you'd say, well, that's all right, but I'm going to do it again. And you just go over and over and over until you had some nice outlines. And then you take a photo of them, which brings me to the next point. I have some sketches I did over an earlier A. I'd like to show this real quick, because this is what's this is the picture that I'll be using as a background. Sorry guys, the bunker is getting shelled pretty heavily right now, so so here's an earlier gas that I had. I had some gas earlier, and this is what it looked like. And then I did a Sharpie sketch over the A. And then what I wanted to show you guys was how I would do some contrast. So then I drew another, like I was just showing, but I increased the contrast on all the thins. So I made all the thins thinner, and I made the lacrimal teardrop bit a little more sad, a little more lacrimal. And now I think I'm going to switch over to how I would digitize these. So get a good look at the physical copies, y'all, because we're moving to computers. We all love computers. We're on computers right now.
So let's turn it around. Voila! Look at that. There's one. That's an A. From the paper. Everybody remembers the paper. So I've drawn the first one. This is the one without a significant amount of contrast, right? It's pretty, I think we'd call this like a book weight. It's a little bit heavier. This might be a medium. I usually draw a little heavy because I've got clumsy big oafish hands. But luckily I have a computer and I can make things more delicate when I get on my computer. So I've taken the liberty of, and I'm using glyphs here. I don't know if there's any questions yet, but taking the liberty of setting up a optical size axis. Just to get really crazy, I thought I'd do an optical size axis. And there's a couple of like registered axes for variable fonts, but this is mostly just to talk about how to make an A thinner in certain areas. So let's not get too complicated here. So we've got the regular master and we've got a 96-point master. So regular I'm thinking of as like, this should be, maybe at like, 10 to 16 point. It should look pretty normal. I want it to be a sort of workhorse reading font. But what if I want like a very like, a display version of this? Okay, let's do that. So I'm on my first master here. I've got the drawing, and you can see that my outline, if you see the drawing and then the outline, they're a little different from one another. So I've gone and I've fixed up some of these bad curves, and I had skewed the image a little bit so that it would stand more upright, and I could get these nice, vertical. Oh, that's not nice. So I can get these nice verticals for the stem, and I'm using a nice tool from Simon Cousins called Super Tool, which when you select, let's select these curves, you can balance them real fast. And they'll, you have to decide with your eyes. That's typography, but it does a pretty good job of like if you get your points on Extrema where you think they should be, and then you're trying to balance out some curves pretty quickly. It helps you draw fast, and there are still some things that need to be cleaned up on this A. For example, should probably work on the way that this ductus works here, because this curve is really abrupt for me, and it's just frustrating. But let's talk about drawing. So,
why do you draw in parts instead of only one figure?
That's a good question. Mostly because when I go to, let's say, like file export, you should be writing a build script for this, but say you're just like exporting a font. You're going to be removing overlap anyway. It's checked. And that's for static fonts, but in a variable font, for example, you want it to have a little bit of like accordionness, I think of it as, which is why I like, for example, on the lacrimal bit here, I have an overlap, because it's really hard to control like that single point and keep that curvature. I like to think of it as like, it's like the bits of a suit that are folded inside, right? Like you need, that's a horrible analogy. What's a good way to put it? Like a folding knife or something. You need it to sort of slip. You need there to be like a joint in there so that it has like room to move about. And if you wanted to like adjust it, it gives you more freedom in that regard. And also, maybe you just want to edit the curves on your bowl, or you just want to work on that. You can take it apart, put it back together. It also it goes with like the sort of logic of the drawing itself, right? I mean, you drew it in 2 strokes, like this way, or 1.5. 2. And so I try to think of the letters as
their stroke order. It just gives you a sort of logic for constructing things. And then for the point order, or at least for like where the on-curve points are located, I like to do a lot of constrained points, like these are constrained, which means that on the verticals, these will always be at a 90-degree angle because I've constrained the off-curve points to those on-curve points. And then if you don't know this already, this is a good time to bring up that you should always put your smooth curves on the extrema, right? And they should be orthogonal, right? Which just means that you've got your horizontals, or sorry, these are vertical, these are horizontal. So if you've got an extrema at the bottom of a curve, it's going to be a horizontal, smooth point.
Is this application good for beginners in type design?
Yeah, I would say Glyphs is probably the friendliest. There's a Glyphs Mini, which is even friendlier. Glyphs is super powerful. They're all super powerful at this point. You could get FontForge or Bird Font or any. I mean, FontForge is probably a little bit difficult to use if you're just getting into type design, but it is as powerful and it's free. All right, let's draw the other one. So I'm going to copy this because there's no, and I'm going to paste it. And oh my goodness, it's so different from that guy, right? So we know that we want to make, we're not going to get anywhere near close to that drawing, right? But we know that we want it to be thinner. So let's select some nodes. Oh, now I know why Matthew Carter, I'm not going to compare myself to Matthew Carter, but I will say that now I know why he's like, I don't want anyone to watch me draw. So I'm going to nudge these up, make them thinner. So obviously this is much thinner now, right? So we need to make this. I don't think that's how it's going to work. So I imagine that at this point in the video it's going to get really boring because it really is just like watching paint dry to like watch somebody move curves around. For fuck's sake. There's also a lot of swearing involved when you're drawing. Still too. Let's get in there. So what I'm trying to do right now, guys, is I'm just trying to make my thins a lot thinner, just so I can show you what this might start looking like. And I'm actually going to delete the background picture because it's not helping me. It's probably not helping you. So let's say that we are happy with the... I just switched back to the original master, right? I'm going to switch to the other one. So they're starting to look pretty different, or different enough. But what I want to do is make this even skinnier. Okay, let's say that this is what we've sort of landed on for our display. The art directors are all going, please don't do this. Sorry, it's what I decided. Oh, that's rough, guys. I'm going to make, just a second. There we go. Cool. I like it when the master I'm working on has an A as the glyph to represent it in the menu up here. It just, I don't know. It's a little thing I like. And maybe actually in the display we decided that we wanted it to be like a little narrow, say. Let's just say that that's what we wanted. I don't know why we wanted that. It's atrocious. Let's say we did that. And then let's make our side bearings different. Cool. And now the fun part. Let's see what it looks like when it we got to change. Sorry. Optical size. This is going to be 96, and this is going to be, what do we say, 12? Okay, now it should work. Can everybody see that? Maybe I'll make it here. It's what we want to focus on is right here. So now I'm just going between the optical sizes, right? So here's the 12, and there's 96. But you could make instances all the way along that design space, right? Cool. And I guess now I'll open it up to questions, because I think that's what I was trying to cover, and I tried to stay in the time limit for each of them. So
You did perfect.
cool.
Flip around.
Let's talk type. God, it's so great to be here with you guys in my apartment. It's a bit strange. Are there any questions, comments?
There are heart eyes emojis. Someone said hello.
Oh, hello.
Someone waved. There's actually a lot of people waving.
Well, I love waving, so I really appreciate the waves. If there aren't any questions,
Maybe you could recommend some books.
yeah, let's look at some books. Why not?
What was the program you were using?
That was Glyphs, but I'm not trying to promote just Glyphs. I use FontForge. I use FontLab. RoboFont is obviously an extremely good font editor. It makes it sound like I don't use it. I use RoboFont. You could use like the Dutch type library, like OpenType Master software. There's a editor in that. There's a really cool little editor called Lemo. I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to the editor that you use. The same way I feel like I'm pretty agnostic as like concerning like the tools that you draw with. I think if you're comfortable drawing with things, there's a huge world of software at this point.
Someone said they missed Type Thursday.
Me too.
And that it was great.
Oh, thank you. Or maybe the Type Thursday is great, but yeah, Type Thursday is great.
Someone would like to see your pen collection.
Oh no. It's in a lot of plastic bags on top of a bunch of books over there, on top of a bunch of quarantine supplies. But we have I don't know, I have a million pens. I also, shout out to the highlighter. The highlighter is incredible because it is very cheap and it has a broad nib on it, and you can also get very thin. And it's super brightly colored, and so if you're ever on the subway, if any of us are ever on the subway ever again, which might happen eventually, then yeah.
Can you go more into instances? Do you look at your instances before you choose the weight you're doing?
You can use drawing a bunch of I think what's typical is that you would draw some things you're really happy with, and then you're trying to find things in between them in terms of exploring the design space. So if the thrust of the question is do you draw all the extremes and then try to find things in the middle? I think that's not misguided, but it takes a lot longer to do it that way versus drawing a couple of masters that you're really happy with and then finding sort of sweet spots in between those master drawings. So I don't know if that answers the question correctly, but instances are just the named spots along any variation axes that could create a static font or are basically rungs on the ladder of your variable space.
What is the first thing you'd recommend for someone who likes lettering and wants to get into type but has absolutely no background?
Yeah, sure. So I've got a couple of books here that are really, really great.
That goes into the next question, which would be, what books do you recommend?
So, Lettering for Reproduction is a classic. It's so good, guys. This is a really great book because it's just really no nonsense. It's just like a. Well, let me open it up for you.
Also, what are you drinking?
Whiskey. What kind of whiskey? Knob Creek. With a little bit of orange bitters and some, what's that sugar called? Demerara sugar. Obviously, you should read Harriet Norzai's The Stroke. It's doesn't you no good if I just stare lovingly at the book. It's something you need to look at. It's a very good book, and I think it's like $30. They just this is a reprint. It was really hard to find forever. Yeah, but it's with the index. It's 86 pages long, and I mean it's drawn in one, or it's typeset in one of his unreleased fonts. So the whole thing is just like a living sort of prayer to the beauty of the written word, and it's an incredible book. Can't say enough about it. Other books, I mean, I just like getting the here's a Nordzai Prize book actually, but it's Fred Smyers is just a great type designer. But it's any book with a lot of type in it. Like here's just some lovely large type. Just try drawing letters that you like is what I would recommend. You can go crazy and get here's the Javier Dupre book is really good. Jim Crowell's Alphabets book is good. You can just pick up modern specimens. This is just a Heffler and Co. Specimen. You can go really crazy and you can pick up the ancient tomes of this is just the Linotype Corporation put out these huge specimen books, and going through these and trying to draw not exactly the way they did because they had a lot of constraints that we don't have in terms of casting hot metal. You have to make some decisions that we're just completely free of. So we're very lucky, but I don't know, just going through all of the, I mean, I don't know, we were just in Germany and I picked up just a handwriting book, and it has a good little advertisement for all the pens you could buy in 1930 from Berlin. More books, okay. No, wrap it up. Okay. Hey y'all, thank you so much for stopping by and having a little typography fireside chat. I know things are really glum right now. I hope that my incoherent rambling helped you not think about all the horrors in the world right now. So, all the best. Miss you guys. We'll see you soon. Take care.